This CD is Barbara Symons on Saturday Morning, titled Bridging the Gap.
Well, it's my honor to be here. Can we move this out of the way? Yes, I think I'm going to stand. My honor to be here. How's that sound? And I have to apologize to you first off because I think my plane, when it landed, brought the hot weather from Texas. We have experienced over 40 days of 100-degree plus temperatures in College Station. Is that y'all vibrating that sound, or? Okay, now you're supposed to ask me, how hot is it? Well, let me tell you, it's so hot that when hell freezes over, they're leasing Texas. So, I'm in a room with a lot of spiritual seekers. I can see it. You've got that hunger and that desire to know, to transcend these dimensional boundaries and to enter into the age to come. Last night I just cried myself to sleep because I want it so bad. I want to be able to be and to see and to occupy that space beyond the gap. We have come at such a wonderful and unique time in history, and most likely it's not your first go-round. But we're going to get there. I want to tell you just a little bit about myself before I go on. I was as a little kid, I was very unusual. Had this intense hunger for God. My parents had some best friends whose little girl was born with cancer. Back in the day, in the late 50s and early 60s, they used a lot of different medications to get you pregnant. And this baby happened to be born with level 4 cancer. She had cancer all throughout her body. And we saw that baby miraculously healed. She's a nurse today and flourishes and is just a wonderful human being. But that was just one of many things that whetted my appetite for something more than what I had experienced. At age 5 or 6, I had a white light experience where as I was waking up, I saw this pinpoint of a white light. And as it came closer and closer to me, my heart beat wildly within my chest, even as a little kid. And it penetrated the right side of my head. Came right here, and I felt it go in, and all of a sudden I woke up, and I was talking in a different language. And I was told that that was speaking in tongues. And one thing that you'll find out about me is I have very little filters. Actually, no filters. And so I went to my neighbor's house, and I demonstrated to them my new language skills. And I actually went around the block and demonstrated to every neighbor that would answer the door because I found this peculiarly fascinating. So as a little girl, when I would walk into meetings, I would feel this palpable feeling of spirit on me and around me, and I couldn't get enough of it. And I lived, breathed, ate, and taught and spoke about spiritual things, even though I was just a little kid. How many of you remember Jesus people back in the day? I was part of the Jesus people. I was a part of my traditional Lutheran church. My pastor thought I was quite strange. I was a part of Full Gospel Businessmen's Association. David Wilkerson's ministry was Nicky Cruz. How many of you remember that? I was involved in 2 small home churches that I attended every week, along with numerous retreats, ski retreats, camping retreats. And I was a distributor of street-level newspapers at 12 years old, and I began to teach and lead prayer groups in my school. And at the age of 15, I kind of had a break from all of that, being teased and under a lot of peer pressure, so I smoked a little pot. Went the way of a renegade until my father died suddenly at age, a little bit later on at age 15. And but I just couldn't escape the grasp of the Spirit. It was on me constantly, and I could never get away from the voice that would speak to me and just tell me things that I didn't understand what they were. So as a young adult, I got back involved in church and was involved in a church called Good Shepherd in Milwaukee, and loved it and was very much involved until the pastor told me that I needed to marry the boyfriend that I was not interested in marrying. So I saw a lot of control. But, you know, we see these things, but we give it a pass. We give religion a pass because God still works and flows even in the midst of error, doesn't he? And so I would always feel this wonderful presence of the Spirit, and yet, the man would speak some things, and it would kind of just go, that doesn't sound quite right. But I would give him a pass. And we acquiesce these false beliefs into our system, and it takes a lot of years to come out from that. Anyway, I got married, and my husband told me that he wanted nothing to do with church, and he said, all right, I'll go with you, but if they mention money just one time, he said, I'm out of there. And I said, they never talk about money, so you don't have anything to worry about. So we went to church, and they started talking about the building fund that they wanted to build a school for the kids. And I looked over at my husband, and he just looked at me like, oh, yeah, I'm never coming back here. And it was about 3 months later that $90,000 disappeared along with the church secretary and the pastor. And I was just completely disillusioned. And so I stepped out and away for over 10 years. Upon my reemergence back into religion, we joined a Bible church in Alabama, of all things, and where the preacher was called the Prophet. And if that tells you anything. And we also joined a very liberal Second Presbyterian church. So we were quite confused. Quite confused. But I still, the faithfulness of Spirit is always there no matter where you are. And it took me a long time to realize that these were internal things that were just activated by my thought and my attention of attending somewhere else. But anyway, I came to rest at a church in College Station. It was a United Methodist church. And it was a little bit strange because it was a Spirit-filled church, a Spirit-filled Methodist church. And I actually got involved in the deliverance ministry. How many of you know what that is? Deliverance ministry. Had a lot of fun and experience with, believe it or not, fun, casting demons out of people. We just had a blast seeing people get free. We loved it. We had a volunteer ministry staff of about a dozen people, and we would travel our region and even as far as California and the East Coast, just being and doing what we knew how to do. There were some interesting experiences that we were able to see, some funny things. One time a friend of mine was dealing with a woman who had a really terrible eating disorder. Not that she wouldn't eat, she just ate way too much. She was quite obese. And in the midst of dealing with her, my friend said, you come out of her, you spirit of gluttony. And out of the woman's mouth came, I'll come out for a cookie. I'm serious, Catherine, am I telling the truth? We saw a lot of interesting things. We even saw people's bone structures change. Bones rise and fall within a human body. We saw eyes change color from beautiful blue to bright yellow. But we saw, bottom line is we saw a lot of people get free. And I was overcommitted at my church. I was on the Administrative Council of Elders. I was on a pastor's advisory group. I was in charge of women's intercession and prayer for the church and in charge of deliverance ministry. And in the period of about 3 months, it all came crashing down amidst a lot of rumors and accusation and slander. And I decided to check out. I thought, this isn't for me. I can't do this anymore. And I actually had a spiritual breakdown. And when I say spiritual breakdown, I had a friend of mine come to me one day and was talking to me about somebody that was sick in the hospital, and she was worried whether or not she was saved. And I put my head down and I kind of shook my head, and my brain was searching, and my friend said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I don't know what that means." She said, "What do you mean you don't know what that means?" I said, "I don't know what saved means." She said, "What do you mean you don't know what saved?" I said, "I don't know what saved means anymore." It was like, remember back in the day when you would lose Windows and you would go back to your DOS screen on your computer, your hard drive would crash? Well, my spiritual hard drive crashed big time. I lost my terminology, and I lost a lot of my doctrine. So over the course of the next several years, I began a deprogramming process. That was all by myself. I didn't pick up my Bible. I didn't talk to God. I didn't pray. I did a couple of book studies. Actually, I did pick up my Bible. I got to retract that. I did pick up and study the book of Matthew. But a lot changed in my vernacular, a lot changed in my understanding, and I had to let go of a lot of things that were just pure and simple false. And I started learning about this wonderful Spirit, Source, God, whatever it is that you want to call Him, and His faithfulness. But in trying to relate these mysteries to people, there was great misunderstanding. When you are talking to a people that do not have the capacity or the language to hear what's being said now, sometimes you can get into a little bit of trouble. How many of you have been misunderstood? See, even my husband misunderstands me from time to time. I'll tell you a story. We were driving down the interstate in our city, and I was trying to relay a reason why I had spent $150 on an item, and I knew that my husband and I had had this discussion, and I knew that he approved, but for whatever reason, his memory was a little selective that day, and so I said, "Look, Lyle, I discussed it with you." And he said, "Well, I'm disgusted with you too." I said, wait, what did you say? You said you're disgusted with me? Well, we ended up laughing. But isn't that just like human behavior? If you say, "You hurt me," well, then I say, "Well, you hurt me too." Anyway, but he is my hero. He's a wonderful man. I wish he could have been here. He travels with me from time to time. Such an awesome man. And I want to tell you, just after that introduction, I want to tell you a little bit about when I heard this voice tell me to bridge the gap. It was November 13th, 2005. And my boys and my husband decided to take a motorcycle trip to the Houston Reliance Center. Has anybody been to the Reliance Center in Houston? It's a brand new football stadium. Well, they had a motorcycle show there that day, so they decided to hop on their motorcycles and take a trip. My youngest son was riding a Harley, and my husband was riding his Harley, and my middle son, Christian, was riding a crotch rocket. Everybody know what those are? Yeah. Very fast motorcycles. And that morning before they left, I had begged them. I begged Lyle. I said, "Please don't go. Just stay home with me today." And I asked him, I think, 5 times. But for some reason, I just had this just a little bit of uncomfortable feeling, but not enough to really, pitch a fit about it. My youngest son, Christian, had just come back from Iraq, serving 2 6-month terms over there, and came back without a scratch. So they get on their bikes, and about an hour or so into their trip, I got a phone call. And my husband told me Chris put his bike down. And I said, "Is he okay?" And he said, "Yeah, his leg's a little messed up, but we're going to take him to the hospital. He's probably going to need surgery." And I said, "Okay, what hospital are you going to?" And he told me Memorial Hermann. Is anybody familiar with Dr. Red Duke? Dr. Red Duke is the top trauma doctor, and he instituted a lot of programs, including Flight for Life. So anyway, I said, okay. He said, well, we're going to be at Memorial Hermann. And it didn't click to me that this was the top trauma center in the state of Texas. And I thought, well, that's odd. Why wouldn't they go to Conroe, which was only 50 miles away? But again, I was on autopilot. My son was hurt. I was going to get to Houston. So I dropped off my mother and my sister, who I was having breakfast with, at home, and went and picked up Chris's fiance. And as we drove down to Houston, I told her, I said, you know, there's only one thing that my husband would lie to me about. I said, so you need to prepare yourself. I said, it could be worse than what we think. And she said, well, what did he say? And I said, well, he said his leg was hurt, was broken, and that he would need surgery. So, ironically, Lyle and I arrived at the ER room at Memorial Hermann at the exact same time. And they were calling me back in to see my son Chris before they took him into surgery. And I didn't know that he had been life-flighted there. I thought he had gone by ambulance. And I saw my husband walk up to me with my son, my youngest son, and I looked at him and I saw this strange countenance about him. And he said, Barbara, before you go in. And I said, what? And he said, it's worse than what I told you. And I said, what? And he said, well, Chris's arm came off during impact. And I said, oh, my God. And his knees buckled. And he told me that as they were driving down, actually, he didn't tell me this then. He told me much later on. But the first thing that I said to Lyle was, your dreams, baby, your dreams. Because approximately 3 to 4 months prior to the accident, he sat straight up in bed 3 times with a vision of Chris without limbs. Just a body without limbs. The second time he woke up and it was without an arm and a leg, and the third time it was without an arm and a leg. And he was just cold, just, sweaty and cold and wondering what in the world. And when he woke me up and told me about it, I would say, I think it's maybe just leftover fear or something from him being in Iraq. I'm sure he'll be fine. So anyway, Lyle told me that his arm had come off in the wreck and his knees buckled, and I grabbed a hold of him and I looked him straight in the eyes and I said, your dreams. Remember your dreams. Now, what mother is going to say something like that? But I told him, remember your dreams. And those 3 visions helped get us through the course of the next 5 weeks in the hospital. But anyway, on the road, Lyle said that Chris was driving parallel. You know how bikes will ride next to each other? And Keith, my youngest son, was behind. And they're riding parallel, and Chris is closest to the center line. And he was looking over at Lyle, just looking at him. And Lyle was driving thinking, what is he staring at me for? And why isn't he paying attention to the road? And even though Chris had sunglasses on, he was able to see the eyes behind the sunglasses, and Lyle told me they were vacant, that there was nothing there. And so Lyle was looking at him, looking at his eyes, and finally he gave him a head nod saying, you need to pay attention now, look forward. And when Lyle nodded at Chris looked forward, leaned the bike over, and went into the oncoming lane and never came out. He impacted a bright red F-250 head on. Chris was going 70 miles an hour, and the truck was going 70 miles an hour. Neither one of them saw each other, and it was a bright, beautiful day. And Chris was not wearing a helmet. So his arm came off on impact. Lyle was driving, and he said there was a curtain of debris, just an explosion, and there were pieces of metal and plastic and gas, and it was just, he said, an explosion. And what Lyle didn't realize is that the chassis of the engine of Chris's bike was now coming towards them, being propelled back at them like a rocket, and he was able to dodge it, and Keith was able to dodge it, and they came to rest right by Chris's body on the side of the road. And Lyle jumped off of his bike and ran over to Chris, and Chris was gone. He was white. He was white, and he wasn't bleeding. There was no pulse, and there was no respiration. And Lyle's knees gave out, and he fell alongside of Chris and gathered him up in his arms. And he said, "Barb, I made a sound." He said, "I didn't pray. I made a sound." He said, "I wailed, holding him up to my chest, and held him for several minutes and let him down, and saw that his son was gone. He had departed the body." And he looked, and there was a man that was walking down the expressway with Chris's arm in his hand. And Lyle looked at Chris's left hand and looked at the fingers and saw that they were gray, and looked back at Chris and just thought, "Oh my God, we've lost him." And he stood up and he looked around and he asked Keith if Keith was okay, and Keith was sobbing, and again Lyle's knees just gave out from underneath him, and he found himself gathering Chris again up in his arms and pulling him to his chest. And he said again, made this sound that I've never heard a human being make. He said, "I wailed, Barb, I wailed." And laid him back down and stood up and realized that we had lost him. Just then there was a voice that hollered out, "I'm an EMT off duty. Let me through." And here comes this little 5-foot-tall woman, off-duty EMT, former Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. And Lyle said, "He's gone. There's nothing we can do." And she looked and said, "No, sir, he's not gone." And Lyle turned to look and saw the color of life had returned to Chris's face. And he was starting to wince and to roll around on the ground in pain. Now, her husband happened to be an off-duty fireman paramedic. The people that were traveling with them were off-duty paramedics. And they happened to have bungee cords in their car. They were the first people behind the truck that hit Chris. And they were able to respond so quickly that they stopped the blood, stopped him from bleeding out. And they got him to the emergency, or to the ambulance came, and she happened to be the secretary of the church where we used to attend. And she was able to make a lot of phone calls, a lot of prayer was going up. So they got him taken care of, and he was life-flighted out, and that's when I received the phone call. So I'm on my way, and that started 5.5 weeks of recovery. But in the emergency room, the doctor, whose name was Dr. Rose, and I'm very much into symbolism and synchronicity, which is the name for Christ, Rose, Dr. Rose, came and sat down in front of me and told me, "Chris is in trouble." He was in surgery. And he said, "We need to take his leg. He's bleeding out. His blood pressure is 50/20. And I pushed him away from me and just said, "Go. Do what you need to do." And little by little, as the hours went by, friends were arriving in from out of town. And I had 5 people come up to me, and they all said the same phrase. They all said the same thing to me. Not, "Oh, Barb, I'm so sorry. Oh, my gosh, how's he doing?" They all came up to me, embraced me, and whispered in my ear, "The Spirit of the Lord says, do not look at this in the physical. Look at it with the eyes of the Spirit." And the first person, I nodded, yes, yes, and then filled him in on the details. Second person came in 20 minutes later and said, "The Spirit of the Lord says, do not look at this in the natural, in the physical. Look at this in the eyes of the Spirit." So the Spirit started speaking in the midst of my hysteria, and I was hysterical. Because here the doctor came and said they were going to take his left leg, and I already knew that they couldn't salvage his left arm. And so in my mind, I was thinking, how in the world is he going to even convalesce? How can he wear a prosthetic if he can't grip a crutch to learn how to walk? If he's missing the left side of his body, how is that going to work? And so I, as a mother, went into this place of extreme, I don't even know, conflict, confusion, hysteria, but I felt like I had pulled out of my body and went up to my right somewhere up here. And there was a calmness up there, and I heard the voice of Spirit speak to me. And he said, Barbara, remember, he chose this, and so did you. I said, that's a myth. It's not God. I didn't choose this, and why in the world would he? Barbara. Well, yes, you did. From before the foundation of the world, I made known to you and him the mystery of my will. And you said, here I am. Send me. Why would anybody want to do this, God? Why? Remember, you chose this, and so did he. And all is well. I didn't get it. I thought, why in the world would people choose suffering like that? It also made me think about little kids that have been abused, people that have lost their children, spouses that have lost their spouse, rape victims, horror, torture, everything. But I had this new understanding, being up in this place, somewhere up to the right of me. I had this understanding that, yes, we choose all of our life's experiences, and that there is no human suffering that does not produce something of value in the earth. No human suffering that does not produce something of great value. And when I grasped that and understood that, I moved from victim to participant in life's unfolding dramas. And that day changed my life. Later on that evening, I told the Spirit, I said, I want to talk to you about not looking at this in the natural and looking at it in the Spirit. I don't understand that. And he said, it's because you need to bridge the gap in your natural, carnal, limited understanding to see things in the eyes of the Spirit. And that's when I begin to have the understanding. Can I be strange with you for a minute?
We're strange.
This is a school. Earth is a school. It's actually a terrarium of sorts, and it's growing something called Christ consciousness. And this seed of Christ that's within you, like the broken bread of communion, has willingly come down the portal of death to rest in humanity, to reap all of the rich experiences of the realm of good and evil. I want to explain that a little bit more in depth. I'm going to use my PowerPoint to help me a little bit. What is the gap? It's an expanse of undeveloped consciousness between this dimensional level and the next. In part, the gap exists when we fail to migrate out of historical, literal interpretation of spiritual texts. The gap can be bridged by intention in our conscious awareness when we forsake the history for the mystery. It's the gap that Christ consciousness must fill. How do we evolve our consciousness? We must become conscious that Eden is not a place in history, but a state of consciousness. Let these words just kind of sink in as I read the next couple of slides. Pharaoh is representative of our own egoic nature and drive. The Passover is an event that occurs as our consciousness evolves, where our firstborn, our flesh and blood body, does not die. The divided Red Sea is our own dual consciousness. And guess what is buried in that sea? But the strength of your egoic nature, the horses and the chariots of Pharaoh. You following me? Wandering in the wilderness is the willful migration between the dimensions. Yes, it did happen in history, but let's look past the history into the mystery. In the New Testament, it talks about these things that happen to these poor folks wandering in the wilderness, getting bit by serpents. And it says these things happened to them as examples for you, upon whom the end of the age has come. So we need to look at the Old Testament as a state of your unfolding consciousness. You get that? It's a roadmap. Yeah, it's a history book too, if you want to look at it that way. But it's a state of your unfolding consciousness as you develop from the seed to the full-grown stalk with the full head of corn. Jacob's ladder is our DNA molecule, the place where the divine dwells within the heavens of a man. Mary is representative of humanity willfully impregnated with the seed of Christ. Christ is growing within you and will soon overtake the garden. We choose all of our lives' experiences in order to be fully exercised in duality, or the knowledge of good and evil. Let me talk to you a little bit about Mary being in a Catholic center here. God bless the Catholics for holding such imagery and symbolism for us. But Mary maybe was one woman, but what are we to glean the mystery from that history? The truth is that humanity, you are Mary. And at some level of your consciousness, when all that is came to you and said, guess what? You're going to become pregnant with a holy thing. And Mary, humanity, you said, let it be unto me as you have spoken. Virgin, because never before had spirit successfully penetrated biology. This is a grand experiment. Never before had spirit successfully penetrated biology. And now Christ is wrapped in the swaddling of your flesh and blood. The symbolism of Mary being the chosen one is humanity. That's you. And you bear within your body the seed of Christ. And he's wrapped in the swaddling clothing of your own biology. Isn't that a beautiful picture? How do we evolve our consciousness? We must become conscious that the Bible is not a history book, but a map that outlines humanity's conscious evolution. Did y'all get that? Old Testament, that's you under the law. That's you under the law of the flesh. New Testament, new consciousness. Book of Revelation, Christ. That's you. Forsaking the history, for the mystery, you are the Ark of the Covenant, and in your consciousness lies an outer court, an inner court, and a Holy of Holies. The Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Book of Revelation. Now, as we grasp these spiritual truths, let me tell you a story of a man that calls me about once every 2 months. He's a pastor up in the Dallas area, and he calls me and he asks me the same question for the last 4 phone calls. He said, Barbara, would you take some time and tell me about Melchizedek again? Tell me who he is, what he is. So I spend about half hour, 45 minutes on the phone with him, tell him who Melchizedek is. And a couple of months go by and he calls me again and says, Barbara, would you tell me about Melchizedek again? So I tell him about Melchizedek, and a couple of months down the road I do the same thing. Well, guess what happened yesterday? Who did I bump into on the way in here? I held the door open for somebody. I don't remember who it was, but he called again yesterday. So I was in Kmart talking about Melchizedek. And when I get going talking about Melchizedek, I am very passionate in talking about him. But anyway, I'm saying that because the veil between the inner court and the Holy of Holies sometimes tears a little slowly. And we have to hear it again and again and again and again until that consciousness evolves to the point where we can receive the truth of who we are. And it's also stepping out of your intellect, head knowledge, and into spirit. That's why the Bible is relatively quiet on Melchizedek, because it's not something that you can learn with your brain through a book. It's something you become, something you are. You transition out from having a mother and a father, a physical existence, the masculine and the feminine, when Jesus said, unless you forsake. And in other scriptures it says, translations it says, unless you hate. That's giving up your mortal carnal existence, your beginnings from a sperm and from an egg. You are Mary, corporate humanity, the virgin because never before had divinity penetrated biology. Are you getting that? Never before. This was a grand experiment. And there's a reason for this experiment. Did you know that the divine, all that is in an etheric environment, heavenly space, without material, and decided to venture into the material world? He wanted expression in the material world. Carl Sagan wrote, if you want to bake an apple pie from scratch, who knows the rest of that? You gotta break an egg. If you want to make an apple pie from scratch, first you must create the universe. So if the divine wanted experience in a material world, what did he have to create? Space and time, matter, substance. And then he had to create and evolve a helpmate through which he could experience the material worlds. And that's you. That's who you are. You like that? I like it. You are the divine wrapped in the swaddling clothing of flesh and blood. A peculiar treasure, a peculiar people, because you carry within your framework evidence of the eternal, the spark of the divine. Carriers of exceptional ability that makes your heart beat, the synapses of your brain fire, the blood vessels contract to move congealed light through your body. A unique amalgamation of God and man, or Emmanuel. That's what you are. Within you lies divinity. You are equal parts God and equal parts man. That's what Emmanuel means, is God with man. God with man. You're the pearl found in the oyster. You're the treasure hidden in the field. You're the treasure in earthen vessels. The Christ that resurrects the body from mortal to immortal. You are, I am. And you are a miracle. You're so unusual and peculiar that the essence that comes in as your soul petitioned for the right to come here and become physical. You're so unusual that celestial beings from all over the multiverses come and observe your conscious evolution. It's an unusual being that gets to experience this earth school. So rapid is the expansion of consciousness in duality and the knowledge of good and evil that it's highly desirable to come and partake in it. As a human being, you get to experience something so wonderful and unusual. Does anyone know what that is? Emotion. Emotion. You are a generator of electromagnetic waves that come out of your chakras. And through that propulsion of electromagnetic energy, guess what you do? You create reality. You create your own reality by the electromagnetic forces that comes out of your chakras. So you are here. Paul said, I must fill up that which is lacking in the way of suffering in the body. So we, as Paul, are banging it out down here, filling up that which is lacking in the way of suffering, because suffering produces experience and obedience. Your electromagnetic energy that you output through your chakras moves reality. And right now, we are here just now finding out that we are the creators of our own world. So when we focus our thought and our emotion on anything and we say, that's evil, guess what? It is. Because the divine is cradled in your swaddling clothing, in your biology, and the divine has issued a decree and a statement, and it is what you say it is. Yes, Mom. You are a creator. And when you deem something evil, it is. That's why we are given the task now as awakening Emmanuel to understand that your judgment is causing whatever it is that you're focusing on to flourish. To flourish. Let me diverge for a minute. What is the Christ? Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am. Deepak Chopra has a wonderful book called The Third Jesus. Anybody read it? If you have not read it, get it. He talks about the historical Christ. He talks about the Christ of Christianity. And he talks about the cosmic Christ. See, the history came to be a pattern and a mystery. Christianity marred him beyond recognition. And the cosmic is pre-existent no matter what we do to him. So when he said, before Abraham was, I am, Abraham was the father of Judaism. And Jesus said, I'm beyond that. As Christ, I predate all of your religions. I am the unique amalgamation of God and man because I've already been through the earth school. I've graduated. I've gone on to other dimensional levels, but I agreed to break my immortal status, broken bread. I agreed to break my immortal status and to come back and be a pattern for you, my brothers and my sisters. That's what Melchizedek is. He has already successfully transitioned through the earth plane and beyond, well beyond, and has come back to show you the way to the Father, if you want to call it that. What that is the incredible ability to create reality. It is a potent energy that is able to form atoms and energy in atoms to create the material world. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to that creative potential except through me. And what did he do but show us an example of the self-life crucified? Yes, you're supposed to grow up. Yes, you're supposed to have your own identity. Yes, you're supposed to bang it out down here with all of your wonderful earth experiences. But there comes a time when you have to surrender to that part of you that's been growing in the garden, that is ready to overtake it. If you want to get to the Father, if you want to get to that creative potential, if you want to get to the place where you're creating reality, if you want to frame worlds that are immortal, then you must come to that intersection of your horizontal existence and your immortal existence. And that which has control of you, your ego, who is master of the body, must lay itself down in death, not to stay there, but to be resurrected as a servant to spirit. Is that powerful?
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Christ is the amalgamation of God and man, a successful merging of the spirit and biology. Christ is not a name, it's the title of a divine being that has previously graduated from the earth school and has successfully resurrected the body. When the angel spoke to Mary, you said, "Let it be unto me as you have spoken," and you bear this seed of Christ within you. In all of your lives, you have been banging it out, filling up that which is lacking in the way of suffering, so that this divine being can experience the full essence, the weightiness of the knowledge of good and evil. Because what you're doing is you're filling up these buckets of electromagnetic energy in the way of experience. Whatever you experience, you benefit me. If you've been raped, you benefit me. Because you have experienced that torment and that violation. You've experienced it for the whole. And I'm telling you that as bad as our experience seem, these buckets of electromagnetic energy need to be filled up. Here they represent things in the carnal nature, but there they represent the ability to create rock, dense energy coming from the lowest pits of despair can move a mountain. I'm telling you. Energy that's good and light and joyful. You create a butterfly or a hummingbird. They may represent things that you deem evil here, but there it benefits you because you have the full knowledge, the full working ability of being able to project this electromagnetic energy out of your chakras and create reality. Do you follow me? Do you understand what I'm saying? All of your experiences benefit you. And if nothing else comes from today, from this talk, you need to recognize you're not a victim. You are a willful participant that has said, I want this experience. I want to house the Christ within my body, and I want Him to come bursting out and enter into the age to come, my physical body being raised from mortal to immortal. And participating in the fields that are not limited to 120 years, that are not limited to rust and decay and rot and mold and mildew. And that is the limitation that's imposed upon you right now, because you are creating reality by your ego. And it is limited. Thank you, God. Lest man eat of the tree of life and live forever as an egocentric being. Do you follow me? I'm starting to sweat now. As Christ, you choose to surrender all of your experiences, both good and evil, light and dark, that create the tapestry you call life. As Christ, you crave physical reality. You love the material realm and all the classrooms it creates for you. As Christ, you love to learn. As Christ, you appreciate the full spectrum of emotions that are produced by this biological container called the body. Getting there to the other side of the gap. An awakened soul realizes the power in thought and recognizes that we are on the cusp of entering into the age to come. Do you hear me? We're on the cusp of entering into the age to come. This present age where the egocentric human needs rules, regulations, and boundaries to govern its renegade behavior. It is this age that Paul governed, laboring intensely until Christ be formed in you. Paul was a governor of the ego. He came to impose rules and regulations on your flesh and blood. And you know why? Because we need the rules and regulations to govern our flesh. But in the age to come, you don't cheat on your husband because it's adultery. You don't cheat on your husband because you love him. You don't rob a bank because it's illegal. You don't rob a bank because you love humanity and it's not right to take. So this being that's growing up inside of you does not need the law. And indeed, you have been freed from the law. Because the seed that's growing within you is Christ. And it's perfect love. Perfect love. Paul labored intensely until Christ be formed in you. Jesus manifested the age to come, called the kingdom when he displayed mastery over matter or the material realm. Clearly, he was not bound by our law of physics. Jesus came to model for us a transcendent human being fully endowed with spirit. Jesus found and forged the way to the Father, the creative, eternal, life-giving source of all things. The Father is within you. The Father is the creative component resident within Emmanuel. But you can't get there by selfish, egoic means. The pattern that Jesus came to display was, okay, you've lived your life as David. Now live your life as Christ. And if I, the divine, wanted expression in a material realm, then I need a lot of helpmates. And those helpmates are you. You're Eve. As a human being endowed with this unique power to create and maintain reality, we must recognize that it is in the cessation of our judgment and bringing our consciousness into a place of allowing and accepting that will bridge the gap between this age and the next. It is through non-judgment that we must rise from this limited spectrum of vibration. We must focus on things that are pure, lovely, and of a good report. It is our judgment that maintains the environment of the third dimensional level. I'm going to read that again. It's our judgment that maintains the environment of this third dimensional level. Fourth, if you count time. We are creative, and when we focus our thought on something mingled with the appropriate emotional value, we create more of what we focus on. Do you get that?
Yes.
Because the Creator lives within the biology we create every day, no exceptions. Thankfully, we have a governor on our ability to manifest, and that governor is time. It is a great helper in learning these life lessons. By grace, we have a time gap between our thought and its manifestation, lest we create what we think about. Would we be in trouble, some of us here? We must learn to take every thought captive under the obedience of Christ. God and man blended together. Judgment is thought mingled with an emotional component that sets the wheels of creation in motion. And I want to tell you, I meet with a professor, an astrophysics professor, quantum theoretical astrophysicist from Texas A&M University. How many of you read Dan Brown's The Lost Symbol? Anybody? Read it. Very good read. I know it's a novel, but very good read. A lot of truth in there. In it, he talks about a type of Faraday environment that's free of electromagnetic waves being able to penetrate it, because they want to measure the effect of thought on quantum bits of material. That's in the book, and he said it's a room that is existent under the Smithsonian Institution. Well, guess what? That's not fantasy. It's true. And Texas A&M University has recently released funds to build a model to show that human thought affects quantum bits of material. Your mind and your thought moves matter. I have to give you this story real quick. Are we still okay with the heat and the time? Are you okay? My sister was practicing what Abraham talks about. Abraham, the channeled entity that talks about how to create. And there was a man she was sitting next to at the bar, and he was complaining about his cancer, complaining about his wife leaving him, his kids leaving him being in debt, not really even being able to afford a beer or gas in his car or food for his fridge. And she said, you need to do something different, because what you're doing is creating more of what you don't want. When you continue to sit there in your funk, focusing on it over and over and over again, you are reinforcing your position. She said, let me give you an example. If you don't understand what I'm saying, you have no money in your pockets, but pretend you do. Pretend you have several $100s in your pocket. Now feel what that feels like. Remember the scripture. Jesus said, if you ask what you will, believing you've received it, be surrounded by the receiving of that, you will have it. And what else does that mean but creating an electromagnetic field of attraction to you? So she said, you have to picture that you've got the money to pay your rent. You've got to picture you've got food in your refrigerator. You've got to picture this amount of money that says, I can do whatever I need to do in the next several days and next several weeks to provide for my existence. I've got it. I've got it. It feels good. It's right here in my pocket. She said, that's what you need to feel like. You need to feel it coming from inside. You need to create that emotional spectrum that says, I have plenty, I have plenty, I have plenty. And guess what the universe says back to you? Here's plenty, here's plenty, here's plenty. But when you say, I have need, I have lack, I have lack, I have lack, the universe doesn't understand words, it understands emotions. So it says lack, here you go, lack. Lack, lack. That creative component works no matter what. And she said, so you have to pull from it way down deep inside. You have to feel that money in your pocket. You have to know that you're provided for. And it feels good. Plenty is much better than lack. The bartender came up to Karen and said, Karen, how about, would you like to do the shake of a day? And it's a Yahtzee cup with dice in it, a little leather cup. And what you do is you put a buck in this big big pickle container that they put a slot in the lid. You put $1 in there and you do the shake of the day. You get 3 of a kind, you get $5. You get 4 of a kind, you get $25. You roll 5 of a kind, you get half of the contents of the pickle jar. So as Karen's talking, she's saying, you just have to believe, you just have to believe. And she rolls 5. And the contents of the pickle jar was $600, to which she received $300. Now, there are times, I think for our own example, that we collapse time. She didn't have to go through this progression. All that is answered her for the purposes of demonstration and said, oh yes, it works. So all of this to say, let's not judge our life's experiences as good or evil. They are what they are. Recognize that you're in training, that you're growing, that you're beginning to understand the mechanics of what it takes to create reality, and go on. What can that hurt but set you free from pain and trauma of being a victim? What can it hurt you? I'm going to close with this. In a book titled The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, Volume 2, Chapter 17, Duality Transcended. It's a great book. The possibility of ending duality is impossible as long as we remain in the consciousness of good and evil, eating from that tree. We have to transcend it and enter into a different consciousness, a different wineskin, if you will. But we cannot do that if we continue to judge. Judgment releases electromagnetic energy out of your chakras. As long as we continue to judge the events in our lives, we give power to them as either good or bad, which determines the course of our lives. To end it and then transcend it, we must step outside of this polarity. We must change, and this change has to come in some way from our not judging this world. For it is in judging that we decide that something is good or bad. That is the basis of good and evil, or duality consciousness. Bottom line, you're not victims. You are participating in this grand drama we call life. And if you stop your judgment, you'll stop creating the reality. Just like a weaver on a loom, your judgment threads that needle that works back and forth in the threads of light and dark. Light and dark. And the tapestry of life continues. If we want to transcend this dimensional area, if we want to transcend the next dimensional level, then we have to stop threading that needle and creating that tapestry. Now, what I want you to do for the rest of, what I want you to do sometime today is think about the times that you've been victimized in your life. Think about the times of pain. And if you can enter into a place of appreciation and allowing and remove your judgment, you'll be one step closer. I'm telling you, we're in the place of the overlap. The seed of Christ is growing within you. Your consciousness is evolving, and you are beginning to be sprinkled with the contents of the age to come. It's a glorious place, and you've lived a glorious life. And I am thankful, and to each one of you I say, I salute you, namaste. Thank you for your life's experiences that have added to the rich tapestry of the life here on earth. Has not been without purpose. It has great value. Thank you.